from Monsieur Guy's men. While Migiwa departs the yacht with Suya, she appreciates him for answering her call and then begs him to move to the point above the sea where Treasure Island fell. Later that day, Azuma proceeds with his team inside Ubu to the point where Treasure Island crashed. On getting there, Azuma tries to gain access to the island, but the barrier prevents him from doing so. Because of that, he tries to break Ubu's heart, but his team warns him about the consequences of doing so. Surprisingly, Migiwa arrives at Azuma's location with the Buranki Zampaza. It appears that she took the Buranki from Suya and left him stranded on the sea. Migiwa intends to sink the island by creating a hole in the barrier protecting it. Azuma does not like the idea that his mom's life is going to be at risk, and because of that he tries to block her from sinking the island. Along the line, Migiwa does something to Ubu that sends him out of the sea. With Azuma out of the way, she proceeds to destroy the island, and as a result, a nasty explosion occurs underwater. Elsewhere, Monsieur Guy observes the effects of the explosion from his screen and looks unbothered for some reason. It turns out that Migiwa's actions did nothing but accelerate the awakening of the comet heading for Earth. Sometime in the past, Monsieur Guy inherited a Buranki as heart from his family. Along the line, he had a child, and the heart was passed down to him. At that time, Monsieur Guy considered the heart a curse, and was relieved when his son inherited it. Unfortunately, his son died, and the Buranki's heart returned to him. From that time, he decided that he would rid the world of the Buranki species that tainted the human race. In the present, the island's explosion causes a huge Buranki, Deus Magna, to stand at the sea. Azuma sees the Buranki and realizes that the Buranki is who Doruk explained as their leader some days ago. Elsewhere, Entei breaks into Marubai's airship and abducts Ryoko. It appears that Entei is being controlled remotely by a false heart placed on it. Entei then heads for Deus Magnus, and he enters the neck while under Monsieur Guy's control. Seconds later, the comet arrives on Earth and changes into a large metallic ball. It turns out that the comet is the head of the Deus Magna, and when the head settles, a nasty explosion occurs. The Japanese Navy mounts guard on the sea and fires countless missiles at Deus Magna, but the missiles do not affect him. Meanwhile, Lakshmi and her team witness all that goes down from a distance. While at it, Ryuki arrives at their position and is forced to apologize for what he did to them. After he is done apologizing, his team is left shocked as they never imagined a time when Ryuki would do such. In the meantime, Ryoko floats inside Deus Magna's neck and looks unconscious at the time. Migiwa, on the other hand, is in an astral form, and she walks along the streets of Tokyo City where Azuma first saw the remains of Ubu. What she sees leaves her confused, and she wonders what Ubu's remains are doing there. Ubu then appears at her back in astral form and reveals that he has been waiting for her. The fact that Ubu can speak shocks Migiwa, and she asks about what is going on. The last thing she remembers is that she wanted to destroy Treasure Island. After some careful thought and observation, she assumes that she is dead and then proceeds to confirm with Ubu. For some reason, Ubu remains silent, but then calls Migiwa our child, after some time leaving Migiwa shocked. Hours later, Monsieur Guy arrives at Azuma's location floating with Durak. It turns out that he took control of Durak's body, and Azuma wonders what he is doing there. It is at this point that Azuma realizes who Monsieur Guy is, as he is opportune to see him face to face one more time. Azuma, who is pissed at the time, proceeds with Ubu to attack Monsieur Guy, but fails as Monsieur Guy breaks Durak's heart and unleashes his true power. Durak cannot absorb Monsieur Guy as his brain because some adjustments were made to his body that prevents that. But it also gives Monsieur Guy the power to take total control of Durak. Durak then attacks Ubu and defeats him in a single strike, sending Azuma and the clothes falling to the sea. After that, he flies up into the atmosphere and gains access to Deus Magna's head. He assumes control of Deus Magnus and launches some apocalyptic missiles at the city. The missiles cause a nasty explosion that makes Hiragi assume that Monsieur Guy will wipe out the world. On the other hand, Azuma receives info from Akihito about the data that Hazama stole from Democratia, which she guised as a secretary. It appears that Entei is acting as a keystone Todd allows the fusion between Deus Magna's body and head. Hazama then explains that taking away Entei from the body will cause Deus Magna to self-destruct. With this information, Azuma decides to rescue Ryoko and take Entei away from Deus Magna. Before he leaves, he asks Ryuki for his help and he agrees. They both team up to defeat and deal some damage to Deus Magnus, but Ubu gets knocked away in the process. Elsewhere, Evans and his team watch the battle at the sea from a distance. Moses then approaches Evans, who looks sad at the time. He tries to find find out if Evans still has a fighting spirit in him, and after he confirms this, he offers his Bubuki to Evans to use against Monsieur Guy. His other teammates offer their Bubukis to Evans' team so they can use them in the battle against Monsieur Guy. Evans, who looks determined to take his revenge on Monsieur Guy, flies away with his Buranki Megalala. On getting to Deus Magna's position, he sees Kyoruko, who is piloting Zanpoaza at the time. He then offers a Bubuki to Kyoruko because she asks for one of them. Meanwhile, Azuma lies unconscious in Ubu after being knocked off the sky. At sea, Evans arrives at Deus Magna's position and offers a Bubuki to Ryuki so he can use it to fight. At this point, all three Burankis team up ready to fight Monsieur Guy. On the surface, Azuam regains consciousness and all damage suffered by Ubu is healed already. His team was conscious at the time and they all agreed to proceed with their objectives. In the meantime, Migiwa converses with Ubu on her astral form. The fact that Ubu addressed her as our child leaves her curious. Because of that, she intends to know why she is being addressed Tatway. Ubu then takes Migiwa and ascends into the uppermost part of the Earth's atmosphere, where he explains the history of Burankis. He explains that the Buranki are Deus Magna's servants, and they are the ones who prepare the planet that he will be on when he comes. He also adds that the Buranki species arrived on Earth because they wanted to escape the fate of their supreme leader, who wished to modify the planet with his overflowing life. He also explains the part where humans formed contracts with Burankis via their parts called Bubukis. Eventually, a being was born that could also be called a Buranki, and Ubu reveals that the being is Migiwa. Migiwa, upon hearing this, looks shocked, and Ubu goes on to prove his theory. The fact that Migiwa bore children and did not lose access to her powers proves Ubu's theory, and Migiwa now understands who she is. Back in reality, Azuma undoes his fusion with his team so that they can go ahead and clear a part for him while he flies out to join up with the others. In the past, Migiwa sees herself when she is about to fuse Ryoko with Entei's heart. She looks confused because of what she sees, but Ubu explains that she can travel across time with her powers. With this knowledge, she understands what she has to do from that point, and then proceeds to merge with Entei. The fact that she merged with Entei allowed Migiwa from the past to save Ryoko by fusing her with Entei's heart. While Ryoko sits in Deus Magna's head, she realizes that Migiwa has been protecting her all this while because she was present within Entei's body. Soon, Azuma gains access to Ryoko's position, intending to save her. Ryoko, on the other hand, is emotional because she believes she never lived even after Migiwa saved her life. Azuma witnesses all this and begins to console Ryoko by telling her that everything will be alright. They both shake hands and Azuma agrees to join forces to take down Monsieur Guy. Soon, Azuma proceeds out of Deus Magna's body with his team in a fused state called Ubu Entei. Azuma and Ryoko pilot Ubu Entei, and Monsieur Guy look shocked by their union. Even at that, he claims that they are no match for him, and he proceeds to attack. The battle between Ubu Entei and Durak goes on to a point where Durak deals some amount of damage that affects Monsieur Guy. He is pissed because Entei is no longer in Deus Magna's body after all. He acts as a link between Deus Magna's head and body. He then continues his battle against Oibu Entei, but this time he gets knocked into Deus Magna's body. Because Monsieur Guy is in Deus Magna's body, he assumes that he has a fighting chance against Ubu Entei, and then proceeds to choke his opponents using Durak. The damage on Ubu Entei is felt majorly by Azuma. Even as Durak chokes Ubu Entei, Azuma stops focusing on the pain and then he overpowers Durak, leaving Monsieur Guy shocked. He sees an opening and proceeds to take it, stabbing Ubu Entei with 2 plasma weapons. Because he managed to stab Ubu Entei, he looks excited, but his happiness is short-lived because Ubu Entei still proceeds to attack him. As Ubu Entei gets closer to Dorsu, Azuma prepares to land the finishing strike on Monsieur Guy, but Ryoko takes the shot before him because she does not want him to have Monsieur Guy's blood on his hands. Seconds after Ryoko lands the last attack on Durak, Monsieur Guy gets up on his feet with blood on his head. Azuma and Ryoko look shocked because they thought the last attack would take him out. Monsieur Guy then speaks of the boring reality that Azuma will return to after defeating him. His words get to Azuma, but Ryoko detaches Entei from Ubu Entei and kills Monsieur Guy at the spot. After Monsieur Guy's passing, Migiwa's consciousness, which is in Entei, speaks to Ryoko and tells her that she is leaving because the comet came for her. On the other hand, Ryoko is sad about the fact that Migiwa is leaving, and she shed tears as a result. Before Migiwa leaves, she unlinks the connection Ryoko has with Entei, and then begs her to take care of Azuma and Kyoruko. Meanwhile, Kyoruko floats in midair with Zanpaza, and wonders if Azuma is dead or not. Soon, the head of Deus Magna takes off into the atmosphere, heading for outer space. Asabuki watches this from a distance, and then hears Azuma's faint voice from a distance. She follows the direction of the voice, causing Hiragi and the others to join her. 12 months after the incident in Tokyo City, applied to a different high school and got transferred there. One day, he gets to school and meets up with Asabuki, who is his classmate. Later that day, Azuma interacts with a teacher, and when he displays his ID, the personnel quickly realizes that Azuma is Migiwa's son. He then approves of Azuma's transfers and sends him off to class. While in the classroom, Azuma's new classmates address him as the witch's son because he bears Kazuki in his last name. Later that day, Azuma reads letters from Evans, who is on a journey to make his mother's heart work. Elsewhere, Hiragi walks along the streets of the city with Ugi. They both converse about their recent activities, and at a point, a topic about Azuma's high school transfer comes up. Later that evening, Azuma sits at a park all by himself. Two security personnel approach him and ask him why he is out so late. Because Azuma is a high schooler, both personnel advise him to go home because it is not safe. The following day, Shizuru wakes up in a classroom, and it appears that she was studying all night and slept off. Elsewhere, Hiragi bumps into Asabuki on the streets of the city, and they both enter into a brief conversation. It's been a while since Hiragi had seen Asabuki, and because of that, he asks about Asabuki's well-being. When Asabuki suggests visiting Azuma, Hiragi does not look interested because he wants to leave that part of him behind and embrace living a normal life. Later that morning, Matobai gives Azuma a lift to Ryoko's location. While on the way to the place, Matobai enters into a conversation with Azuma where he asks about his school life. Meanwhile, Hazama is present in the car and she begs Matobai to drive more carefully. It turns out that Hazama is pregnant and she suspects that she is having twins. Moving on, Akihito stands at a graveyard and pays his respects to Lyudmila and Diana, who died as a result of Monsieur Guy's influence. In the meantime, Matobai arrives at the facility where Ryoko is, and then Azuma leaves the car to go see her. On getting to her room, he observes that Ryoko acts strangely toward him. It appears that Ryoko does not know who Azuma is, and because of that she yells at him to leave. Suya hears Ryoko's voice from another room, arrives at Ryoko's room and calms her down. After the encounter with Ryoko, Azuma converses with Suya about Ryoko's condition. It turns out that Ryoko lost her regenerative abilities, and Suya reveals that she lost her memories. When Azuma hears this, he looks surprised, but Suya is okay with the fact that Ryoko is now a normal human. Also, because many people may hold a grudge against Ryoko, she is placed in a secured facility where none of her potential enemies will be able to get to her. Later that day, Kaoruko receives the remains of her mother's stuff from Azuma, who sent it to her. The package takes up lots of space in the room, leaving Kaoruko frustrated and uncomfortable. Even when her friend Joan tries to help her, she experiences difficulties opening the door, and because of that, she leaves to get help. Later that evening, Azuma walks by himself to a different park and sits alone. He looks lost in thoughts but takes note of his surroundings when an old man falls drunk on the ground. He then moves closer to the man to see if he is okay, but then he gets flashbacks of Monsieur Guy about when he talked about how boring life will be for Azuma living like a normal person. After some days, Asabuki notices Azuma's absences in school and looks worried about him. One day at sunset, Azuma sits alone at a spot and remembers the time he spent with Ru fighting against their shared enemy. After some time, Asabuki arrives at Azuma's position and speaks to him about the adventure they had in the past. She is worried about the fact that they don't speak to Hiragi and the others. Tears roll down her eyes because she misses her team and the experience she had with them. Seconds later, Ugi arrives at the scene with her Bubuki, and Asabuki looks excited to see her. Shizuru arrives at the scene too, and Asabuki is happy to see her. Coincidentally, Hiragi arrives at the scene and looks surprised that he ended up in the same place with his old team. He intends to remember his journey with his team once a year, and Asabuki looks excited by the idea. On the other hand, Azuma does not look happy, but Hiragi and the rest of the team manage to cheer him up. They all appreciate him for helping them in battle and bearing most of the pain that Ubu suffered. In the end, Shizuru suggests that they all go to Treasure Island, and they all agree. At this point, we have reached the end of our video. If you like it, do not forget to put the like button and subscribe for more new videos.